Hi, this is Luke from Boss Web Systems, and I just want to go through how great tables are and some of the steps in inserting them and then populating your content. So, if we have a look at some of the table usages on this page, we can see that I've got some columns side by side, I've arranged some images horizontally, and I've also got a nice little caption under this image here. And I've done all of this with tables, so let's have a look at how it's been done. If we head to the editor, here we go. So you can see that the columns were just one row with two cells. The images, again, quite simple, just one row with three cells. And the captioned image was just one column with two cells. So how would you add one of these tables? Place the cursor where you want it to go, and I'm just going to replicate this dual column cell, table, row, whatever. And so I've just placed the cursor, and then I'm just going to use the insert table tool. So if you click this little down arrow, we then select how many rows and columns we want this table to have. You can go all out with an 8x8 table if you want, but you know, we're not going to be that ambitious, and one row with two cells will do for us. Okay, so there it is. When you first put it on the page, it's very small. It's got no instructions at all to tell it how big to be or what to take up, so it's quite unobtrusive. So what we need to do is to right click inside the table and then select Table Properties. So the window that pops up has a couple of different elements, and we'll talk about the Table Design tab first. So the Table Design tab shows the structure of the table overall. Here we can increase the number of columns, we can increase the number of rows, we can do all of this cool stuff, but you know, we don't really need to because we have a pretty simple table here. Table Properties is where you sort of set the actual values for the properties in the table. You can set an absolute height and width, however you're much better off using what we call dynamic values here, so percentages. And the reason for that is if I set this to 100% as opposed to 800 pixels, then it's just going to scale down with the page for anyone viewing it at different resolution, different device screen size, all of that sort of gear. So 100% will just take up the whole page, and I don't have to worry about putting in an absolute pixel value. I'm also just going to leave the height blank, and that way it will just fit to my content. Underneath that, we've got cell spacing and padding. So these are a little bit tricky. Cell spacing is the gap between the cells themselves. So how big is the gap between column A and column B? I'm just going to make this 1 pixel. Doesn't need to be far. You can just leave it blank if you want. The cell padding is the gap between the outside of the cell and the content. So for this, I'm just going to make it 10 pixels, and then we've got a nice bit of padding so that if there is text that crowds against the walls of the cells, they're not going to squish up against each other, make it hard to read. Then we've got the alignment for the table itself. Now you can align this to the left, to the center, to the right, and for example this captioned image is a right aligned table, but because I'm taking up 100% of the page, I don't need to worry about an alignment for this one. You can also set a background color if you're really keen. Backgrounds for the whole tables can be a bit obnoxious, but again, that's entirely up to you and depending on what you're using it for. We've also got the style builder here. Now if I click into the style builder, you can see it gives options to change the font and the background. You can even use a background image in here. Again, it's not something that I'd normally do, but depending on what you're using it for. You can change the layout and the flow control, the visibility, whether it floats, all of that sort of thing. So a lot of this you don't really need to worry too much about. Borders are one thing that is pretty handy to know. So I could potentially put a solid border, 1 pixel wide, and just in a tasteful grey silvery colour all the way around to the outside. And OK. So just play around with those options as much as you like, and yeah, just see how you go. CSS class is something that we don't need really to worry about. And the back image is again something that we're not going to use for this. Then we go into cell properties and we can see these two columns. So this is column A and column B. If we had more rows and columns, we'd have more cells in the cell properties. So here we can actually set individual heights, widths, background colors, etc. for individual cells, which is very handy to do. However, for this one, I'm just going to select all and make all of my cells 50% of the total table. Okay, I'm also going to align the content to the top left, because by default that will align to center left, which if we've got two lists that aren't quite even, you'll have a bit of a drop between the start of the first column and the start of the second. We've also got the background color for individual cells and a style builder for the individual cells. So I'm just going into the borders and I'm just going to apply that same border around the individual cells as well. Okay, so now when I hit OK, we've also got the accessibility tab up the top where we can make captions, summaries, all that sort of gear. Again, I'm not going to worry about that. So back to cell properties, I'm just going to hit OK, and there it is. So it's not very much to see there now because we don't have any content. So here, just enter the content like you normally would. Just ensuring to, of course, paste from plain text if you're bringing it across from elsewhere. And there we go. Okay, so if I just update this now and preview, there's our table. You can see that there's a border around the entire table, which is what we put in first, and then there's just a very small gap between the cells and the outside of the table. That's the 1 pixel cell spacing that we put in, and you can also see that there's quite a gap here, and that's the cell padding. Okay, so it is very easy to put tables in. Again, it's just like practicing anything else with the website. It's just practice. So jump in there, have a play around, and good luck. Thanks.